to the channel, Language, Culture, and Dr. Lou, where we explore lots of things having to do with language and culture. And tonight's live stream has to do more with culture. And I read an article the other day that had me really thinking, wow, and made me want to, well, share a couple of the stories in that article with you. And of course, we're talking about unregistered Americans. So these are Americans, so babies born in the US to American parents as well. And but the parents never got a birth certificate filed for the baby, and so they also don't have any social security number. And well, some people like sovereign citizens would really well covet, really want this off the grid status. But on the other hand, a lot of these unregistered Americans are having a hard time because they're pretty much barred from regular life um, without having any legal identity, any way to prove who they are, pretty much. And so before we get into this, I want to make a couple, well, clarifications. Number one is that we're not talking about undocumented immigrants here, and we're also not talking about um, babies born in America to immigrants or whether documented or not. We're talking about folks who were had as a baby born in the U.S. Two parents who didn't want to get official documentation of the birth, didn't want to get the government involved at all. And so this to me, well, it surprised me when I read the article the other day, which by the way, there's a link to this article. It's from The Guardian by an author named Spencer Bailey. Came out on Tuesday, September 21st, so just this Tuesday, a couple of days ago. And yeah, a link to that article is in the post description of this video. So if you want to check it out, I would encourage you. And before we get started on the discussion, I wanted to at least mention two different groups who are important to, well, know who they are, and that both have some influence here. And the first, I would say, is the sovereign citizens movement. And the sovereign citizens movement, of course, they're a loose, decentralized group of A, anti-government activists, and or B, tax protesters, and or C, conspiracy theorists. And they really believe that they aren't subject to government statutes and regulations unless they consent to them. That's one thing that sovereign citizens seem to have in common, as far as my understanding of them goes. And so they don't believe they're subject to government statutes and all that because they often feel that federal, state, and sometimes even local governments are illegitimate corporations. And so they shouldn't have to play by their rules, right? So that's one group I think that has a lot to do with the existence of all these unregistered Americans with no social security number because they have no birth certificate. And then another group that's a little more recent, the free birth movement. They have been what is free birthing anyway? It's unassisted childbirth. So people who give birth at home without any medical professionals present, and often they don't really have so much prenatal care either. And so a lot of women who have birth at home, or even choosing free birthing like this, are not necessarily conspiracy theorists or have a lot of fringe theories going on, but it did get more popular, the whole free birthing movement, with the COVID-19 pandemic and the growing mistrust of mainstream medicine. And that whole mistrust of mainstream medicine has to do with how a lot of sovereign citizens idea got into part of the free birthing community. Hi, how's it going? Um, in the chat, nice to see you here. And anyway, so I think part of the whole mistrusting of the government, that's how some sovereign citizens' ideas started penetrating in part of the free birthing community. Um, because especially those who homeschool and who really don't trust mainstream medicine. And the overlap here, there is a little overlap here with the whole the free birthers who not only want to give birth at home without medical assistance, but also are down with the whole not documenting the birth, like not getting a birth certificate or a social security number assigned to the baby. Um, that particular part of them, yeah, has a lot to do with the sovereign citizens' ideas and all that. Now, again, um, I like to discuss a couple cases about this. So I wanted to tell you the stories of two of the people interviewed by Spencer Bailey for the interview, for the article in The Guardian, which is called The Unregistered Americans. Because of their parents, they do not exist. And I think that's a funny way to put it because, of course, these people exist, right? You can talk to them and see them living and breathing as real people, but they often lack a legal identity. So in the minds of the state, they don't really exist. And that's a little tough, I think. And so the first of the two stories I wanted to talk about is a guy named Sam, and he's 26. And yes, he does exist. He lives in Worcester, Massachusetts, and the reason why the government might think he doesn't exist is because there's no document anywhere that proves that Sam was ever born. And so he was born, I know I said he's in Massachusetts now, but he was born in Keene, New Hampshire, in a pretty libertarian community. And there was no doctor, no nurse, no midwife, any medical professionals. And his parents, who he ends up describing as drug users and anti-government extremists. They were opposed to government documentation, so no birth certificate was ever filed. And so without the birth certificate, obtaining any other official ID becomes nearly impossible. And so Sam here feels like he's stuck in a bureaucratic limbo and a real life nightmare as far as he's concerned because he seems to want to have a regular life, have a real life basically, but joining in with regular society and all that. So without his birth certificate, Sam can not get, well, like I said, a social security number or a driver's license or a passport or even basic photo ID, at least not state sponsored ID, which all that, without any of those things, it means he can't even open a bank account or get a credit card or buy health insurance. Um, and he can't even pass a background check to rent an apartment or get a job or anything, and he can't even earn a GED or enroll in college, or even get a library card, right? There's a lot of things you can't do when you don't have an ID or uh, debit card or credit card, anything related to a bank account to pay for it. And so, yeah, so in long story short, Sam, the poor Sam, he can't even own a car or call an Uber because, again, with no banking account, you can't have an Uber account, and he can't get on a plane or leave the country. And most like interstate buses or trains would even be off limit to him, which is very, yeah, very depressing. Sounds like that would really frustrate me to quite no end. And so Sam is feeling trapped. Again, he's in his mid 20s. He's 26 years old. And he has spent years trying to contact many lawyers and state and federal agencies, social workers, nonprofit organizations, and even some government officials, all without any success in obtaining a legal identity. And so the thing is, I'm pointing out his story, but he's one of hundreds, if not thousands, of people throughout the US who are these so called unregistered Americans. And again, I'm not talking about undocumented immigrants or something like that. I'm talking about kids who were born in the US to American parents who just never got a birth certificate. And they often don't have any medical records either if the birth was a free birth, for instance. And so his status, his situation has a real name. It's called evidentiary statelessness, and that's the condition of being a citizen without any documents to prove it. And that's got to be, well, not a great way to be living unless you want to stay completely off the grid. And in New Hampshire, where he was born again, so Sam was born in New Hampshire, and if an adult wants to seek a birth certificate as for the first time, even as an adult, which he does, because he wants to get a legal identity. And so they have to submit at least 3 different documents that establish their name, their place of birth, and I guess their date of birth. And their parents. And so these documents, they can include like elementary school records or medical records from childhood, but Sam has neither one of these because his parents homeschooled him as a little kid, and they were also anti-vaxxers, so they really didn't want to take him to a doctor. So he doesn't really have medical records from childhood or elementary school records. So having a hard time getting even a birth certificate, and his parents are really not gonna help him out here. So, and why not? Well, first, they gravitated towards the off grid communities. They shared their worldview that the government is illegitimate and that official documentation should be rejected, and a lot of other conspiracy theories that are associated with the sovereign rights movement. That's why I mentioned them a little bit ago. And so sometimes it would help if his parents could help him out there, but Sam's parents won't really, because one partial proof you could give to the government would be a sworn statement from your parents. But Sam doesn't know where his parents are or even if they're still alive, and he hasn't heard from them since they kicked him out of the house a decade ago when he was just a teenager. And so again, it's a sad story. He grew up as an only child, and his parents were estranged from any relatives. So they were living a pretty unstable, nomadic life, moving oftentimes between trailer parks, long stay motels, and squatting in abandoned homes and all that. And Sam says that his mom struggled with an untreated mental illness, while his father had an explosive temper, and all this leads up to, well, how he ended up on his own. It was when he was a teenager at 16, a a dispute escalated with his father, and sadly enough, well, I can't really describe this so much. YouTube has a lot of, well, censorship, we'll say, so can't really talk about this exactly. But his father pointed well, on YouTube, we use the word pew pew to describe them, pointed the barrel of his pew pew right to his head and told him, well, that he should get out of there, and if he ever saw him again, he would kill him and all that. Oh, I should have said unalive. Sorry, I'm not very good. It's self-censorship all the time. And he had a pretty nomadic childhood. His parents were really living so much off the grid and all that. And then he's kicked out of the house at the age of 16 with no money, no nothing except the clothes on his back. And so eventually he, well, hitchhiked all his way from their place in New Hampshire to Detroit. And even there, he was, of course, homeless for a little while. So really terrible way for a kid to be, for a teenager to be. And so for several months, he scraped up money together, finding odd jobs online and through word of mouth. Again, no social security number means you can't legally earn income. So you got to find people to pay you under the table, pretty much. And but eventually he found a way to make his way back to New England and found a room to sublet in Worcester, Massachusetts. And that was, I think he was about 19 at the time. So he spent a couple years putting this all back together. And since then, again, he wants a legal identity. So in part of this, he's been trying to track his parents, trying to figure out where they are, and private investigators turned up nothing. His lawyer helped out, but without success, and he even went to a genealogist and took a DNA test to try to find some extended family, and nothing surfaced, nothing really helped. So as far as anyone can tell, Sam's parents have vanished, and so they're off the grid and they're untraceable. And that's assuming that they're still alive and everything too. So that's worrisome as well. And so in his quest to try to find information about his parents and other family, they actually went back to this place they moved to when he was about 7 in Grafton, New Hampshire. And he thought that somebody might remember his parents around there. And so Grafton, it's a fairly small community in New Hampshire, again, population of less than 2,000 people. And it's kind of known for being the site of the failed Free State Project in the early 2000s. And I hadn't heard of the Free State Project, so I had to sort of look up what this is. And it was an effort by some libertarians to move en masse, meaning to move in and outnumber the locals so they can then slash taxes and regulations and sort of create a limited government utopia for freedom-loving people. So that's what the Free State Project was. And it was, Grafton, New Hampshire, which is, again, pretty small community. It is known as the site for the Free State Project. And for several years while the project was still going on again in the early 2000s, it attracted people of lots of types, like I said, libertarians and many off the grid survivalists, anti-government extremists, and tax protesters, as well as drug legalization advocates and some sex offenders and even some back to the earth hippies, like all different kinds of people um, congregated around this. And so again, he had moved there with his parents when he was 7. So he trying to find information about his parents. He went there, and one of those people he ended up talking with, seeking help about this to track his parents and all this, was a guy named John, and John Babiarz, I think is how you pronounce his last name, Babiarz, Babiarz. Um, he's a former a former Grafton fire chief and a two-time libertarian candidate for government, and he was one of the architects of the Free State Project. So that guy turned out not to be much help. And the funny thing is, in this article, I thought it was funny Sam asking this guy for help, because this guy is thinking that it's great for Sam, good thing for him being a man without a country, being so far off the grid, because a lot of people, especially in the Sovereign Citizens movement, would really want this for themselves. They would think it's a great place to be. And so, but when Sam is asking him these questions, he's all like, "But I don't want to do that," and because Sam wants a normal life, and so that guy John was not much help to him either, and yeah, so poor Sam. It's really, really sad story as far as I can tell. Um, in Sam's case, you got he's not alone. Like I said earlier, there's hundreds or maybe even thousands of people who are all, we could all consider them unregistered Americans because they have no birth certificate, no social security number, nothing like that. So they're a citizen who can't even prove they're a citizen. And reason why I brought up the free birth movement earlier, because I'm kind of worried that a lot more people might end up in Sam's situation for the parts of the free birth movement that have bought into the idea of we should not have a birth certificate or get a social security number, these sovereign citizens ideas that I mentioned before. And so the free birth movement, of course, it's all about giving birth outside of the medical system, usually at home without a doctor and midwife present. So we're not talking about all the people who give birth at home, talking about just the ones who do it without medical professionals, such as a midwife or even a doula or doctors or nurses or anything like that. And well, I think that most women who choose to have unassisted home birth are not necessarily motivated by fringe ideologies, and they otherwise lead pretty normal lives. But again, since the COVID-19 pandemic, sovereign citizens' ideas have kind of infiltrated much of this group, and they've drawn in a lot of families who homeschool and who are especially skeptical of mainstream medicine. And again, the overlap is there because sovereign citizen ideology would see the US government as illegitimate, as an illegitimate corporation. And so they would see a birth certificate as a contract transferring ownership from the baby's parents over to the state. and I get that. If you see this as a contract that would, give your baby over to the state as their property instead, I could totally understand why somebody would want to totally avoid that, right? That to me seems reasonable. So, getting a little back to the particulars of Sam's story, um, he um, was living on his own in, well, 9 years ago now. So this would be while he was still a teenager, after having been kicked out at home, and he decided he needed a birth certificate. And so one official told him to see an immigration attorney. Then the immigration attorney told him that he needed a family law attorney. And then the family law attorney told him he should talk to a probate attorney. And then the probate attorney ends up telling him that he needs an immigration attorney. And so he just went round and round and got no help from any of them. And so that must be really a struggle, since now he's 26 and he still doesn't have a legal identity or a birth certificate, or any other, well, piece of paper proving exactly who he is. And one thing that comes with that is he's not able to work legally, right? Just scraping for uh, work under the counter. And then he struggles. Yeah, he's struggling to even try to make $80 a day, which is what he needs minimally for rent, and just the bare bones necessities, pretty much. And as you can imagine, as an adult, this is having real medical health consequences on him. Um, Being endlessly searching for jobs that pay under the table again. Um, he has severe insomnia from sleeping only a few hours a night, and um, a dental clinic told him that his teeth looked twice their age, and it is likely due to prolonged stress, and his blood pressure is way too high. And again, he's prone to panic attacks. So all this, it's not a good way to live. And again, he's a guy who is just in his 20s. And so that guy, yeah, not loving life so much. And there's actually a lot of, um, again, Sam is not alone. There's a lot of watchdog groups estimate that several 100,000 people in the US consider um, themselves sovereign citizens. So the movement, again, like I mentioned earlier, has no central leadership. So instead, it's operates as a loose network of self-appointed gurus, and a lot of these people, they sell their own mix of conspiracy theories and pseudo-legal documents and tactics, often for substantial fees. And these tactics, like I mentioned earlier, are now appearing in free birth spaces. So I'm hating to think that the sovereign citizens movement might be, well, bringing bad things to the free birth movement. And again, I think it's since the COVID-19 pandemic, more and more people are skeptical of mainstream medicine, and this is only feeding the free birth movement's thoughts about giving birth without any medical professions and professionals, and at home, off the record, and all that. And again, just bringing it back to Sam, he's not loving things, but his story isn't that surprising to him, having grown up around a lot of um, anti-government extremists, and that he is known. He says he is known, and I quote, happy middle class, understanding people. end quote, who decided against registering their child's birth. So he's not, begrudging this against his parents necessarily, because he's saying some respectable people do this too. And he's also admitting that that New Hampshire is a good place to operate like that, without any papers, just doing your thing, getting paid in cash or Bitcoin and whatnot. And but he doesn't want to live in New Hampshire or anywhere else without a legal identity. Um, and he says again, and I quote, "I just want to be able to have a normal life." Hmm. just just be able to drive and just have a bank account and just have a normal job. I really don't think that's asking for too much. So that's where Sam is. And again, his medical problems not so great, with high blood pressure and anxiety, and panic attacks and all that. So feeling pretty bad for Sam. Now, if anybody, um, that's interesting. Um, but yeah, I'm reading some of the comments. One of them said, "Well, that is cool, nut man. Good luck. You maybe will become a doc." That's weird. Already am a doctor. That's part of why this is called Dr. Lou. Although I'm not a medical doctor. I have a PhD, Doctor of Philosophy, and mostly I do language and culture. That's the kind of doctor I am, not a medical doctor, but it is, to me, I love exploring different aspects of culture. Whereas again, Sam's life seems like it's the pits for him, and he does not want to keep it this way. He would rather get a legal ID, and so far he's had absolutely no luck. Even, well, legally proving that he is him. And so not every story is quite that sad. I'd like to share now the idea of Larissa, and she lives outside Portland, Oregon, but she was born in Florida in her mother's apartment without a midwife or any doctor or anything like that. And she never got a birth certificate filed on her behalf either. And now she's in her mid 20s and is all well, wanting to get a job at a bakery and get her own place instead of living with her parents. She wants to get her own place and earn her GED, but without her birth certificate or ID. She spent pretty much her entire adult life so far. Again, she's in her mid 20s, and she's wondering, her entire adult life so far, just wondering if any of those things are possible for her, getting her in place, getting a job, a GED, any of that thing. And so she is one of many unregistered Americans who has spent years trying to find a workaround for not having their birth certificate, or finding a way to get one even though they're an adult now. And these options depend a lot state by state, because every state has its different laws and its own policies and all that. And so it depends on states, and it depends on how much proof these unregistered Americans or their family members can scrape together. So now Larissa, again, wants a normal life, job, GED, her own place, all that. And she's having a hard time proving all these things. Again, like I said, when Sam was looking for a birth certificate in New Hampshire, he would have needed some records from either elementary school or medical records when he was a kid, and he couldn't get them because he was homeschooled, and his parents, being anti-vaxxers, they would never bring him in to the doctor. Now, Larissa has a similar thing going on from her childhood because she too was homeschooled, and and she rarely saw a doctor except once as a baby when the hospital misspelled her name on the paperwork. So that's not going to really help her all that much as an adult trying to prove that's her or anything. And so interestingly, she actually made this happen where she was seeking a passport. Um, so that would, of course, be from the federal government, right? And so she spent months working with an attorney, and so I'm sure this cost her a lot of money. And they were submitting to the passport agency everything that she could provide to prove that she is who she is, pretty much. And so she sent sworn statements from her mother and stepfather, a 2010 census record, a letter from the state of Florida confirming that she had no birth certificate. So when all that wasn't enough, she submitted her mother's passport and a half a dozen affidavits from friends and family, and a chronological photo album documenting her life, uh, as well as a list of every place she has ever lived. Still, even all that wasn't quite enough. Um, and so finally, the passport agency directed her to take a DNA test because she had done enough to already prove that her mother was a U.S. citizen. Now all she had to prove was that she was her daughter. She was the daughter of this U.S. citizen, and so the passport agency suggested she go get a DNA test, and that did the trick. She was able to prove that she was the daughter of an American citizen, and so eventually the passport did arrive in the mail. So she got the passport. Hooray for her, right? This is sounding, well, it's such a better point in the story than Sam is, who is still without a legal ID or anything. And so this, I imagine, was super exciting for her. And let's see if I can find anything here that has a quote from her in it. Okay, yeah. When she got her passport in the mail, she was holding it in her hands, um, and she took what she called the deepest breath, the realest breath she had ever felt. And so she's thought back on all the years she spent wondering if she would ever get proof of her existence and the chance to have a normal life. And now she got it eventually. And she said that she started to cry. I mean, crying tears of joy eventually. But of course, not everybody is all that lucky. So good for Larissa. And so apparently, some of these folks have ways to find workaround, but you would really need the help of your family to do that. And potentially a genealogist and a lawyer, apparently. Um, but yeah, so anyway, so at least she was able to make that happen. But not everybody is so lucky. Like I said, again, Sam is still sitting around wishing that that he had a normal life, that could get a car and a normal job and a bank account and just have a normal life. So anyway, that's pretty much the story of unregistered Americans that I wanted to share with you all tonight. And I haven't seen any comments in the chat yet that would actually bring this conversation a little farther. I wonder if anybody has any experience, if you know any so-called undocumented, well, unregistered Americans. I don't want to make any confusions between undocumented immigrants and the unregistered Americans. Again, I'm talking about people who were born in the U.S. to American parents who just never bothered filing a birth certificate for them, often out of, um, well, sovereign citizen theories and ideas and all that. So if anybody does have any thoughts or any experience dealing with any unregistered Americans, please do bring it up. I would be happy to reply and even happy to look into anything related to that. And I don't really, yeah, well, I'm not really seeing anything pop up, so I guess that's a good place to call it enough for the night. And so my next little cultural thing I wanted to look into, just to give you a heads up if anybody's still around. And by the way, if you are, please do remember to give the video a thumbs up, give it a like. That will really help it with the YouTube algorithms and all that, especially on the replay. And so the next thing I want to look into culturally is how Canada recently changed the law a little bit. Whereas before December of last year, December 2025, Canadian citizenship could extend just by one generation. Like if you were not born in Canada, but your parents were, you could get Canadian citizenship. So they just sort of changed their rules so it can extend to people whose parents were not born in Canada, but maybe whose grandparents or great grandparents were, or even more distant relatives than that. And it has a lot of Americans actually applying for Canadian citizenship these days. So that's the next real cultural thing I want to look into. Also have to do with being a citizen somewhere, but it's a very different thing because these people are all quite registered already as Americans, but they want to just claim their right that they already have, being a Canadian citizenship as well. So anyway, that's just wanted to give you a heads up on what's going to be the next cultural thing. And then the next linguistic things are probably going to be more of my short videos giving little French lessons du jour because people seem to be liking those. So I will keep on producing them. And so thanks again for hanging out with me tonight. There's nothing I would rather be doing on a Friday night here than chatting with all of you on YouTube. So thanks again for making that happen. And yeah, so I'll catch you around next time. Bye bye.